Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the East Coast Fashion Summit. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I know how busy you are and we respect your time, so we're very excited that you were able to join us.
Well, thank you for including me.
Of course. Let's start with telling the people a little bit about yourself and how you became this great fashion house and fashion icon from Nova Scotia, and what got you into fashion in the first place.
Well, this is what I chose for my career. So, this is my educational background, and I trained to be a designer for the garment manufacturing industry. So my goal was always to work in manufacturing, and I've always been very fascinated with scaling and taking ideas and putting them out there in a large way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I graduated in 1990 and started working immediately in the field. And some of the jobs were not very glamorous, sweeping cutting room floors. But my goal was that I would have access to every aspect of the industry and at least touch on every single job that's part of this industry from the ground up, which I think I've done pretty much.
Any you've missed yet?
I don't think so. I think I pretty much swept every floor and cleaned every toilet.
Hear you.
It's all part of it. Yeah.
For your britches,
Mm-hmm.
And where are you based out of? And can you tell also our viewers where your stores are located?
I'm based out of the Annapolis Valley in Falmouth, Nova Scotia. And we moved here from Calgary. I'm actually from Alberta. Right. And I started this company in Alberta and moved here in 1999 mainly to provide a better lifestyle for our children, leaving, downtown Calgary, the concrete jungle, which was amazing. I loved living in Calgary too, but we wanted to have a different lifestyle for them. And so we bought a 4-acre property in the Annapolis Valley, and we moved everything: house, home, family, business, all of it.
That's
so, yeah. And we have stores in our studio in Falmouth, has a full showroom, about a 1,200 square foot showroom. And so customers come in and they shop there, which is a slightly different experience than some of our other stores because you can see the whole process. It's very intimate.
Yeah.
And then you can also see product that hasn't hit our stores yet, or even online, our online store. And you can also shop our, seconds and samples, factory clearance, that sort of thing. So that's a unique experience. But we also have stores in Bedford, Sunnyside Mall, Halifax at Historic Properties. We have a collaboration boutique in France, just outside of Paris, where I've collaborated with another artist and we share a space. So it's kind of a fun project. I also have a mobile boutique. And up until October, we had a store in Toronto, and unfortunately, we had to close that.
Yeah.
Although there was, I don't know if you were aware, but there was quite a bit of coverage on some of the crime we experienced while we were there. And it just got to the point where I needed to pull out just to be pragmatic and for safety's sake, because we just weren't in a location that was safe.
Yeah.
So we may open there again. We've talked to a few people. We've looked at collaborations, but all in all, we right now are operating on 4 locations and an online boutique as well as our mobile boutique.
Amazing. I wanted you to say, because it's so well-rounded. You do it all.
So very diversified. Very diversified.
Yeah. But I wanted the people to understand just how well-versed you are and what great information they're about to receive from you. You know your business. Aside from running an empire, what tasks and responsibilities do you have on your plate? Like, maybe some volunteer stuff or some, special groups or projects you're working on that you might want to let us know about.
Well, we also have another business, and that's Willowvale Estate, and that's our property that we have spent the last 3 years transitioning into a boutique resort. So that's also a full-time job with its own set of staff, so that keeps me very busy. There's always volunteer work. There's always mentoring. I take a lot of calls from people who are trying to get into our industry or just entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah.
And so that keeps me pretty busy too. A lot of the fundraisers that we would normally be involved in haven't happened this year just
Right.
because of physical distancing, but we do love to be involved in community events and try to contribute, whether it's by donation or by something more substantial.
Yeah, you're always ready to give back, and we love and appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
What can you let us know, to the people that don't know already, what is a vertical fashion house, and why is this vertical fashion house so important to you?
Verticality is fundamental in any business, but in the fashion industry, I think it's become even more fundamental. So verticality in a business is tightening your supply chain. The more vertical your business is, the more you own your supply chain, the more flexibility you have, the greater the ability to turn on a dime. Because we own our own manufacturing, I can produce 20 dresses, and then if they are hot sellers, in a week and a half, I can have 20 more.
Right.
So, which is not typical with the way that our fashion calendar has evolved over the last number of years, but it's coming back to that. And many people who survived this pandemic in terms of business were the ones that had way more flexibility than others.
Able to.
Friends and colleagues in the industry who had to pre-purchase their manufacturing time, had to pre-purchase the raw materials. The pandemic hit, they still had to pay for all of that. Factories were shut down because of physical distancing and the rest of it, or they were taking on, projects like massive amounts of PPE contracts and that kind of thing. So fashion was pushed aside unless you owned your supply chain. And it was a pretty scary time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So my verticality really did save a number of our jobs, as well as, kept my company in a healthy position financially.
Yeah, that's really great. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
How do you source your beautiful materials? You use such colorful, beautiful prints. Do you design those yourself, or do you source them out?
We source most of it. We're dabbling with designing. There's so much you can laser print now. I mean, artists are printing all their works on all kinds of different textiles. There are companies that will allow you they'll give you the base styles and you can print the whole garment, laser print the whole garment, leggings and dresses and whatnot. So we do a little bit of designing. My daughter's a visual artist, so we've spent a little bit of time experimenting.
That's sweet.
And the screen printing as well, yeah. She's a student at NowSCAD, so she's got a great level of creativity, and she brings a lot of energy when she comes home to the studio.
Oh, that's so cool. You're not proud at all.
Yeah. Not at all. No. Yeah. No, it's really great, actually. But we do a lot of our sourcing. I used to source a lot in Europe, which I still do. I have a big surprise stash that I was about to introduce to our clientele, in February, and then it hit. COVID hit.
Yeah.
And I found the jobber that buys all of the offcuts from the Chanel house in Paris. And so I've got a bunch of authentic Chanel fabric that we'll be doing something really fun with, but I just haven't had the time to do something really fun. It's sort of been a weird sort of survival time and relearning what is going to work in this new environment, or this current environment, I should say.
Yeah, it's a lot of changes and a lot of questions right now. None of us really know what's going to happen or when things are going to go back to normal, if ever, so it's good that you're able to like pivot, and then maybe eventually you'll have time to be
play with the fun stuff.
Now we're all just trying to work and get through, right?
Yeah.
Can you give any tips to an aspiring designer on where they would kind of start with fabric if they have no clue? Like, where would they find it?
Fabric, it all depends on your scale. Like, it depends on what size your company is. If you're, for example, if you're trying to launch a collection that you want to wholesale and maybe pick up half a dozen or a dozen accounts, you're not going to source your fabric at Fabricville. So, but if you're doing custom work, go to the scale that makes the most financial sense.
Yeah.
In which case there are great incentives with local retailers of fabric, you know, if you buy a certain level of volume and you can get these discounts and whatnot. But otherwise there's the apparel sourcing. There are all kinds of websites. There's the Canadian Apparel Federation, which has resources. The Toronto Incubator, become a member there. There's a wealth of resources there. Yeah, it's once you start looking at certain different suppliers, more of them open up, or you'll enter, like Montreal, there's the Chabanel and the Fashion District, and the big Telio showroom and warehouse there is a place that a lot of designers get started.
That's great. That's great information. Thank you. Can you maybe give us a sense of the types of personalities of your clients? Like, what are they interested in and what draws them to your work?
Our clients. So when I started this collection in 1997, and for many years, we did only tailored suits.
Oh, wow.
Very tailored suits, custom tailored, as well as a ready to wear collection that was in our stores of suit jackets, pencil skirts. We did a lot of, the first suits that we did were very current and on trend in terms of, like, our clientele was entry-level professional women. So a young woman would be leaving law school to get her first articling job. And the options on the table back in the late 90s and early 2000s was you either dressed like your mother or you dressed like you were still in university going to the bar, but there was nothing in between. So we cut suits that were cut like the silhouettes of the trendy styles of the time. So we kind of melded them together, and our tagline was "Power Clothes for Women." And it took off like crazy.
Yeah.
It was, we were so busy. We were opening our third store within a year, and I started with a $250 investment and grew it on retained earnings. So no bank loans.
Wow.
No government funding.
Incredible.
So it was a concept that really took off. And we also, were written up because I had found a stash of unused vintage wools, high-end tailoring wools, which we produced our number of our collections using. And I'd been written up by the Dean of Environmental Design at the University of Calgary as an example of sustainable design in the fashion industry. Because at the time, you didn't use anything old.
Yeah.
Like back in the 90s, you didn't even admit if you went to Value Village or Frenchies or anything like that. It was a very different time, and especially in Alberta. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people were in my industry were skeptical. Oh, nobody's going to want that 1960s vintage plaid or tweed or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I like it. So I bet other people will. And it took off. It was crazy. Oh. Yeah.
How do you stay inspired? Maybe not right now, but normally. What do you go to for inspiration when you're kind of in need?
I do a lot of traveling normally. Not these days, though. I know, it's so sad. But, you know, I'm inspired by people. I'm inspired by a lot of the resilient stories that I'm hearing of people getting through really difficult times, and especially entrepreneurs right now who have really, I believe, taken the brunt of this. You know, where some people have done really, really well, and individuals, you know, had the backup plan with the CERB and with so many other programs, and entrepreneurs had to fight for what little they got. Yeah. So, you know, and there have been some supports, you know, that some have been able to take advantage of, but not before we lost a lot of small businesses, not just in our region, but across the country.
Yeah, it's been really hard to watch, eh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. An A. Yeah. An
A. but those people inspire me. Your question was what's inspiring me, and I'm like, I'm inspired to keep going and help people understand maybe if they did struggle through this time, maybe help them understand what they can do to be better prepared if something like this happens again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I encourage the verticality. Like, we didn't skip a beat. We own our production facility. We own our equipment. I was able to pivot and make 41,000 non-medical masks.
I know.
And
And they were beautiful.
thank you. Thank you. Well, my background is in technical industrial design. So I saw these masks entering the market and I thought, oh man, I need to put some material science elbow grease into that. And finally, after we had produced about 25,000, the World Health Organization stepped forward and backed our material science claim. So that was a good thing. I just try to keep people safe, right?
Exactly.
Face.
Look good, right, Lisa?
Absolutely. Why not? Yeah, form and function. It's got to be both to be good design.
Agree. Now we touched on this a lot about COVID, how it has affected everyone. What do you think all of these COVID changes are going to make the future of fashion look like? You think this pivot?
It's a reckoning right now.
I agree.
It's a reckoning. It's we're losing a lot of brands and individuals are kind of falling off of the map right now in the fashion industry, and some of them will probably be able to revive somewhat, but this industry for the last number of years has gone from really, like, how can I put this? So I graduated 30 years ago. And at the time, there were 3 main fashion programs in Canada, and there were about 500 jobs. Mm-hmm. Today, there are 3 jobs, and there are 500 fashion schools.
Wow!
So it's like not even it's not even remotely the same industry it was when I entered 30 years ago. And our focus 30 years ago was you get in there, you learn every aspect of the business, you work your way up. And unfortunately, 2 things have happened. And one of them is we lost our manufacturing to offshore.
Yeah.
1994, the world sort of fell apart in terms of domestic manufacturing. And secondly, because of that, actually, there were no opportunities for emerging designers to learn these skills. Because school will teach you so much, and some programs will give you a more robust foundation than others, but you don't really know until you're in the industry, in any field, not just fashion. You don't know till you're hands-on and you're working, and those opportunities are almost gone in our country.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happened is that there's been online social media, that all happened, halfway through my career. And there's a lot of, people can focus on the marketing, but at the end of the day, and I've seen it happen, I've been in this industry for decades and I've known many who have come and gone. And at the end of the day, unless that's translating into revenue, whatever you're putting out there online or whatever big ads you're buying in national or international magazines, at the end of the day, it's your bottom line.
Right.
So, I'm kind of like this opposite of the fake it till you make it. And every decision you make for your business, you should be looking at the bottom line. What's the return on investment?
No sales, no business.
Ego aside and go, wait a minute. If I spend X number of $1,000 on this promotion or doing this show or buying this spread in this magazine, what is the return going to be?
Yeah.
Because you can't eat the publicity at the end of the day.
Does not pay the bills.
No. But that's become a big, I've just seen that in my own career, getting like snowballing into this big thing where at the end of the day, I'm seeing these incredibly talented people and brands who are pulling the plug because they've never made a profit.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what was all that hoopla? Like, what was that all about? Oh, well, that was us trying to create demand so eventually we'd be profitable. I'm like, no, you've got to be profitable. Like, that needs to be your first priority.
First, yeah.
Yeah.
A great tip. That's a tip. If you're listening, be profitable.
Yeah. Return on investment. That's an important thing. Yeah.
Numbers.
Yeah.
I know that you've been involved in Atlantic Fashion Week, and last year I got the joy of seeing you as a panelist. And I was just wondering if you could talk on how important Atlantic Fashion Week is to this area and how has it helped or promoted your business, if at all.
Well, I had already been doing my own show for a number of years before Atlantic Fashion Week. Like we were doing one of Canada's largest independent shows by an individual designer, and we were selling 500 tickets
Wow.
to our own show and then selling at the end of the runway. So we had this thing, I'd created this sort of machine that was working, and long before see now, buy now shows started happening, and people would be like, why are you showing the current season? I said, because that's what I'm going to sell at the end of my runway today. So, and it made sense to me. If I can sell $20,000 worth of product on the day that I show the collection, why wouldn't I?
Why not? Yeah.
Why wouldn't I be showing something 6 months in advance because that's the way it's always been done? No. Doesn't make sense financially. So, but with Atlantic Fashion Week, hats off to Angela. Like, she just thought, we need to be doing something here. And there was a very small sort of burgeoning, I don't even want to call it an industry at that time, because I don't think there was an industry requires revenue to be developed.
Yeah.
You look at an industry and you go, $1 billion was generated because of this industry. We're not really even yet an industry here. We're so embryonic. But I think that what Angela's done with Atlantic Fashion Week is given that first little step for people to dip their toes in it. And she's very inclusive. So anybody can show, and it's an opportunity to get some exposure or to get some feedback and find out if and what that next step is for an emerging designer in their goals in their field.
Startups that can't really afford their own shows yet, I guess.
Yeah, a show has never cost me a penny.
Oh.
And I've donated $10,000 on average to a charity after every show. So it doesn't cost me money to do a show. Wow. If you've got a business model and you're selling tickets to an event and you have to sell X number of tickets to cover the venue, and you can still say net proceeds can go to a charity. No, to me, that should never be a barrier. I never had money. Right. Nobody gave me money. I don't have a rich husband. I don't like, but if you follow the proper formula, that's not an excuse. Right. There are so many creative things you can do to put on a show, and mine never cost me anything. In fact, I've donated $240,000 to Nova Scotia women's charities as a result of profits made at my shows.
Yes, girl.
So I get pretty impassioned about this because it frustrates me when I see emerging talent say, oh man, I've got all these ideas, but I have no money. Okay, come and sit at my table. Let's take out your notepad. Let's get this done, because it can be done. But in the meantime, there are a lot of emerging designers that maybe have half a dozen styles, and they just want to see what the feedback is, and they want to know, they want to see what photographers' perspective is on their product on a runway, or so I think it's great that Angela has done that and is encouraging people in their own, personal and professional growth within the industry.
Yeah. What advice, and I think we just kind of hit a lot of it right there, but what advice, especially to young women, would you give to if they might be struggling to find their own voice or to speak out in the industry? What advice would you give them to be able to articulate and use their voice?
Use their voice. I mean, I guess the times are so uncertain right now, and there's so much division. And
isn't that awful?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't even have to list it. The list is so long right now. I think for women in particular, we do have to sort of stand up and yell a little louder sometimes, which is ironic because it's primarily women in our industry, but often the men get noticed the most, because they're just out there and they're more vocal and flamboyant about it and passionate. And we tend to sort of, as women, often just sort of shrink back. Yeah. Oh, do you like it really? Oh, that's so great, So I would say to female designers, entrepreneurs in general, just don't shrink. Don't You don't pull back and be afraid to put your work out there and accept compliments and feedback, good and bad, and run with it. So
That's great advice. Don't shrink. Don't be scared. Go for it. I love that. What is one thing that you kind of did that you wished you never did, like a piece of advice that you want these newbies to like understand to avoid? Like, don't do this. I think you touched on it and I see.
don't do this. Well, I mean, don't get into a bunch of debt. I didn't do that. I'm trying to think, your question was, what did I do that I would advise people not to do?
Didn't, that you just know people should not do that. Even if.
Yeah, don't go into a bunch of debt.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I have had so many friends over the years who, for example, graduate from design school, university, whatever, and go out and get $100,000 loan because their collection is going to rock the world because their teachers said it was great. I've never known one of them to make it in the industry.
Right.
Not once, ever. 30 years, I'm still waiting for that to happen, where somebody comes to me and says, yeah, I graduated, launched my collection, someone gave me money, and here I am 10 years later and I'm viable.
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
No.
So, I mean, and if somebody out there who's watching this wants to point me in a direction, I would love to find out more about that brand and how it made it. Because you just don't know what you don't know. And one thing that I've learned about managing money is if you worked hard for that dollar, you are going to be so careful. You're going to work hard figuring out where to spend it.
Right.
And as much as you can tell yourself, oh, but this is money I have to pay back, or this was a gift from my dad or whatever, but I still am going to respect it. It's just not the same.
Not the same. No.
Not the same. No. So, I mean, I take a lot of pride in the fact that I have worked and grown this business solely on retained earnings. I don't open a store unless there's enough cash in the bank to pay for that store in full, pay the wages for 3 months and the full rent if I sold nothing. Wow. So it's, I take a very, very low stance on risk. And that's what I would recommend anyone who's creative, any creative industry who's crossing over into entrepreneurship, because that's a weird hybrid.
Yes.
Tough. Creative people are like, we can come up with ideas and it can be all great, but then we have to be able to change our cap and go, now I have to look at the bottom line and I have to put my ego aside and I have to put my love for that collection or that style or that project I'm working on the table and look at it objectively. And am I making a profit on that? Am I able to source the materials to scale it so I can make a profit? There's just so many things you have to be aware of in order to make viable decisions.
Yeah. That is amazing. Look, you are giving so much great advice right now. People are
babbling.
Fantastic. What is the one thing that you would tell a new designer to absolutely do immediately? Start
the job in the industry. If possible. It's hard, and I'm not going to say it isn't.
Right.
I mean, and we've hired a number of emerging designers over the years, and I have one with me right now. But even I don't have a lot of jobs, and I'm probably one of the only employers in the industry, in the fashion industry designing right now. But if they can get a job or get an internship, even if their program didn't offer an internship, you got to get into the space and understand what fuels the decisions on the daily that we as designers in the industry have to make. And understand it's not glamorous. Like I am right now, where we're sort of evolving and pivoting some aspects of the business. And I won't get into all the details of that. But the one thing that I don't have verticality over is I didn't own all of the buildings that I rent, that I have my stores in.
Right.
So right now I'm opening a fabric store on my property at Willowvale Estate. And I won't have to pay rent on that property because I own that property.
You're so smart.
Well, and throughout this pandemic, especially, so many people were scrambling for fabric, and they always have. Like whenever we have a fabric sale in our studio, we have a lineup out the door. But I'm thinking, we're going to offer this, and it's going to be a great opportunity to maybe even expand the network of designers and crafters and people in the industry in this region that could become a meeting place or a place to discuss ideas.
That would be really cool. I'll definitely come by when you have it.
Working on it. We have a huge shipment of fabric coming today from Montreal. So
awesome.
I'm pretty excited about that. And there again, the verticality aspect of that is I can basically own my own supplier. So I'll have my own fabric shop that I can bring in multiple fabrics of small yardage, and it's always at my fingertips for sampling. So if I want to, if I'm looking at something that I've loved, but I didn't have a vision for it when I ordered it for my fabric store, it may come up that that's the perfect fabric and I had to ruminate on it for a little while, and I'll have it right there for sampling at my fingertips. So it's nice as creatives. I'm sure you can relate to this. We are impulsive.
Yeah.
We like to have all of the tools of the trade and the available materials and the inspiration all over the wall right there all the time, because we never know when those synapses are going to go off and we're going to go, that's it. That's the next great thing I'm going to come up with or design or put on the rack.
Exciting. So that gets, my next question was going to be, what is up next for Lisa Drader-Murphy? But
one of them
gave us a good, would you add anything?
It's always the same, more of the same, and the tentacles always go out. And I think that's an important aspect too of being a creative entrepreneur in general, is to always reevaluate, what assets do I have?
Yes.
How can I leverage this one? And you have to look at it frequently, because COVID changed the perspective on everything. So I was starting to look at things that I had in a way, for a minute I was horrified that I had to close my stores. Thinking, what am I going to do? I have to lay everybody off like this? That was the ugly cry for me, was knowing that I had to put out all those pink slips. And that was before we knew anything about CERB. Like, we just didn't know what was going to happen early on.
Yeah. And you care so much that it's so overwhelming. Yeah.
Family, when you work, like some of our employees have been with us for years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty challenging. But that's my advice would be to look at your resources when things change, when your industry or your life has been disrupted. I'm now looking at my property and saying, wow, I should have probably done this a long time ago. I have 4 acres of commercial property, commercially zoned property. So, that was the impetus that forced me to change, direction a little bit. And we can all do that. We all have, as creatives, we all have something in our back pocket, or we wouldn't be creative entrepreneurs.
So true. Probably like 5 or 7 things.
Yeah, they're full. They're dragging us down, actually.
So scenario time.
Yeah.
You keep everything you keep all your knowledge, but you lose all your connections. You're transplanted to a new place where nobody knows you. You have nothing. I mean, you've been here already, but what is the very first thing you would do?
Okay, well, I have done this because I lived in Calgary. I was the international expert on I was a design expert on an international television show. I was doing pattern making for Donna Karan and Ralph Lauren menswear, Calvin Klein as well. I did a little bit. I had a lot going on, and there weren't very many places in Calgary that I could go where people didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And when we transplanted and moved to rural Nova Scotia, it was square one from scratch.
Here, if you're an outsider,
we
take a minute to warm up, don't we?
It takes a minute, although it didn't take long, and I got claimed. Like I think it was 2006 maybe. We were featured, our family was featured in a vignette for the Nova Scotia government.
Nice.
And it was called the Come to Life. I don't know what a campaign, I guess. And so they did a short documentary on our family, and it aired in every Empire Theatre in Canada and on every Air Canada flight. So it was that was sort of like that's sort of what sort of changed our position here. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, wow, like you were famous in Alberta? I guess so. And then next thing you know, I had CTV Edmonton, and I'm not even from Edmonton, I'm from Calgary, but flew out here to do another documentary about why did you leave Alberta to go to rural Nova Scotia, because they saw that vignette documentary. Anyway, but yeah, I had to start from scratch. And what did I do differently or the same or whatnot? I just did what I knew had worked initially and knew I was in a different environment. And my immediate focus was to endear myself to this province and this province to me. And I focused on the Nova Scotia lifestyle.
Yes.
And I talked a lot about that very, very early on, because people were wondering, why did you move to Nova Scotia? Like, couldn't you make it in Calgary? And I'm like, that wasn't the problem. Not at all.
It was good.
Quite a lot going on there, actually. I can't even imagine. My company would probably be a lot bigger had I stayed. But I had to slow to this pace.
Yeah.
But yeah, I put it out there, and then before I knew it, we were being taught as a case study at Acadia University, and we still are apparently, as to how to promote the East Coast lifestyle.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's the Lisa Drader-Murphy case study at Acadia is East Coast lifestyle, because that's what I talked about, and you might recognize that tagline elsewhere since then. from a couple of Acadia grads, I might add. But that was the main thing, is to focus on letting people know I chose to be here and I want to be here, and then then the doors started opening.
Yeah,
so that's an important part when you're transplanting.
Yeah.
Don't assume that you're taking everything and your recognition and your success, your past success with you, because you got to prove it all over again.
Yeah. Exactly. Start right over again. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. Such a special thank you to Lisa Drader-Murphy of Lisa Drader-Murphy Apparel. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to the East Coast Fashion Summit today. I hope you all got as much value out of this as I did, because Lisa, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for your knowledge and your generosity. We're very grateful you were able to hang out with us today.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for doing this. This was a big project to undertake, and I'm really impressed with how much work you guys have done.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. That means a lot. Thanks so much, Lisa. Take care, and we'll talk again soon.
You bet.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.